Hi guys, it's the Crash Gals bringing you a 30th century view of all the things that you enjoy. We're talking comics, cartoons, movies, the good media that you might have missed, and the bad things you should stay away from. It's April of 2020, which means we're in the middle of quarantine season. So we'll be hopefully bringing you some um, interesting content to help you take your mind off of everything that's going on in the world and give you a fresh voice and some fresh takes on some of the popular media topics that are out there right now. And because we almost always start with topics, almost always start with comics. Let's go ahead and start there and talk about some of the things that are going on with the comic distribution uh, during the stay-at-home orders and the Great American Shutdown.
Yes. Well, and speaking of, one update is that while we're talking about what's going on specifically with Diamond, spoiler alert, um, this is mostly US centric, as it has been updated that they are going to slowly start redistributing in the UK, presumably because they've been shut down longer or more differently than we are and have, I assumed, tests or something. So they're opening up a little bit sooner than the U.S. is question mark planning to. But anyway, yeah, no, the point is that we're about to talk about Diamond. We're about to, in my part, talk some BS about Diamond, if I'm entirely honest. But this is speaking mostly for North America because while I don't have the specific details, I'm under the impression that it will be different for the UK shortly. So for those who don't know, Diamond is pretty much the monopoly distributor of comics in North America, which means they are they are the Dunder Mifflin of comics. You know, they are between you and Marvel and DC and Image. Basically, all of the big companies use them. There are a couple other companies that have the capabilities of doing that, but Diamond is pretty much considered to be a monopoly by anyone who works in comics, which I did for a hot second, and boy, did my coworkers have things to say about Diamond. Boy, did I have things to say about Diamond as a person who worked for about a year stocking product that they mailed to me. But what we're talking about specifically is how they forced comics and retailers to shut down through their actions, which is a complicated thing to talk about because, to be fair, it's probably not great working in their distribution warehouse, but it's one of those things where we're really going to look back on how people rolled out their COVID plans and what the effects the lingering effects that have and have had. So in the case of Diamond, they pretty much announced out of the blue that they decided they were not going to ship comics from DC, Marvel, any of the bigs, or any of the product that they had. They just full stop were not going to be receiving product, and they would not be shipping product. Presumably for the health of their employees, though I can't speak to whether or not they furloughed or stayed home or paychecked any of their employees. So that's a whole other thing. But they decided they weren't going to do that. Kind of just announced it. And I would love to really just start out the I don't like Diamond brigade before we get into some of the other details by bringing up the quote that the CEO for Diamond had, if you don't mind, because I found it very frustrating. Let me find it. Sorry. This is great audio. Okay, two retailers, the CEO of Diamond had to say, I encourage you to let loose your own creativity. For the time being, you will be able to replenish your perennials from Diamond and or Alliance. But you should also remember the stock you already have in your stores. If your doors remain open, it's likely you will have customers who will continue to seek diversion from the events in the world. Special sales, promotions, and even eBay can help you bring in cash during this trying time. product for which you've already paid may well hold some of your answers. There have been many solid suggestions offered about how to help our retailers, and we will bring many of them together in future communications.
Ooh.
Um, which I find very frustrating. My local comic book shop, he had already gone. It's basically one guy who works every day of the week by himself. Like the margin is so thin for most retailers that he doesn't have any. He can't afford any employees, and he quarantined himself there so he could continue making money without getting his family sick. And Diamond pretty much just left him and other retailers in the lurch because they didn't seem to give anybody any feedback. It was, and I feel confident in making this alleged claim, in that Marvel and DC did temporarily seem to be offering up solutions for how they could directly sell their comics to retailers, and then that changed. Everything was evolving, so it did become clear that that was probably not the healthiest and the safest way, to be fair. But they were so surprised by it happening and heard enough of the backlash that they specifically were like, "Oh well, we'll find a way to get our product to retailers without Diamond." So there was a moment where everyone was like, "Will this be the end of Diamond?" Um,
And it may well
but
be afterwards, but although you did mention that that it sounds like Diamond might be picking up like their distribution
in the
channels in the
UK,
UK.
at least, yeah, that was the news from earlier this week, was that they should be opening. But it's one of those situations where retailers really do have such a thin margin, and the way this shook out, a lot of them were trying to figure out curbside and figure out how they were going to employ their staff on a thin margin and pay for their staff. I know a local store who has gone pretty much virtually online, but they're not getting new products, so this is not an assured thing.
Hmm.
But also, retailers have already paid for and ordered their April subscriptions. Like, the way that it functions, they would have already paid for that. Like, there is at least one, if not two, shipments that they have already paid for that is not being delivered to them
And so that's their
because
revenue
Diamond
for the
is not doing
month.
it.
Yeah, and
Yes.
that's their revenue for the month. And so while they put out that money, they haven't necessarily made it back yet. For if they put out that money in January to pay for March, then February they may not have made that return yet or not, and so they're already on a, like Kay said, on a thin margin. They may not have recouped that money yet, and then so they're going into another month and then another month where they're behind.
Correct.
And the corporate statement that they made was, it was just a textbook terrible communication, because I'm sure that everyone who's involved at retail are sitting there saying, well, I really would like to sell these other things that we have in stock, but that's not what my main customers are actually interested in right now. Like, they want the continuation of the recent run of X-Men, or they want the special events from the Legion of Superheroes, or whatever is hot and new this time, and that's what they're collecting. They may not necessarily be looking to get into Boom Comics and the stockpile that I have there, or some of the indie comics that they're not necessarily interested in right now, or vice versa. So
Yeah.
it was it came across very callous, like a really callous statement. Like, look at your stock and try and sell that, guys. We'll be back later. You know?
Yeah. It really, at any time, honestly, that a big corporation like that says, in future communications, it feels a very specific way about how they are not. There was no consideration of bringing anybody to the table, and they already are not. They're not very good at their jobs to begin with. To be frank, and unfortunately, this is like a local distributors thing, but I don't know anyone who's worked with Diamond who basically hasn't at some point had some issue with their shipment to begin with. You know, like when I used to do inventory, sometimes they'd send me 15 of a thing we hadn't ordered, and then I'd be missing 15 twice over from other from other orders, you know. And so when you've already got a business that doesn't communicate or do its job well to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
and then they kind of just leave retailers in the lurch, you know, there wasn't really any other option. Like it wasn't like a local restaurant closing or something like that, and there was still other things you could do. You know, it'd be like if the distributor for, I don't know. I don't want to compare comics to, you know, something more serious. Let's be, you know, at a time like this. But you know, it'd be like if Charmin had been like, "Nah, just kidding, guys, we're not going to do it," and
Yeah.
everybody was scrambling to figure out how to like get the other brands of toilet paper. But in this case, like Charmin's the only truck, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, and it's good to hear that they're doing stuff in the UK, and it's frustrating at the same time that the way that this happened didn't actually, like, I would have really enjoyed seeing Marvel and DC figure out and other people follow along how to do this without only Diamond. You know, there were ideas being floated, like people being able to buy comic codes um, at the retail shop for Comixology, not specifically that one because that's Amazon, but something like Comixology where they would be getting a digital copy and they wouldn't have to go to the store, but this way some of the revenue, if not most of the revenue, would still be going to retailers. And I think all of that kind of fell flat because their announcement came so quickly, and then because everything escalated so quickly. Uh, and I could be wrong. I don't work in the business anymore, but um, you know, I haven't heard anything about that from my local retailer or for people I know who work for a separate retailer. They are all just doing their best to switch online and send product
And but I'm
that
glad
they
that you
are going to the store to mail.
But I'm glad that you mentioned that though, because I did read, and this is slightly off topic, and because I wasn't prepared for us to go this way, I don't have a link to this. But I did read somewhere that there is a group that is pulling together independent bookshops and creating an online, like a central online seller's market, basically, that's kind of independent from Amazon that allows like booksellers to reach a larger market without Amazon receiving the bulk of their money from sales.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think it would be something. I think it would be actually really cool if there was a way that, through this independent like selling thing, whose name I cannot think of right now, and I apologize because it's out there and it's really cool. Um, but I think it would be really cool if there was a way for comics to get to that point where they could buy like the digital subscription service that is separate from comicology, or you know directly from the bookseller. Uh, but I do want to bring something up about that because I was also reading in an article that a lot of the digital only comics are available, or not. Yeah, digital only comics were still available. So like the new Batman the new comic run based on Batman the animated series, excuse me, um, was available online, but comics that had a print copy and a digital copy, the digital copy was not available online because the print version was not available.
Yeah. Well, because the printers basically had to stop work, you know, and it's one of those things where it goes all the way back. You know, you've got people working on comics who don't know if they should even bother getting it done for the deadline because they don't know if they're going to get paid because
Hmm.
they don't know when the comics are going to actually come out now. Um, and you know, same goes for people whose job it is the middleman to print the comics. You know, layout editors, like everyone from the top down, basically saw probably while being anxious about what was going to happen to their job genuinely, saw the entire situation grind to a halt because Diamond said this. And you know, it's one of those hard situations because the more we hear about what's happening at places that do similar sorts of distribution where people haven't made any real efforts and decisions on how to fix it, they're just it's we all know who I'm talking about, and it's
Mm-hmm.
terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's one of those things where you really want to see a company reach out to the different arms and be like, this is what we think we need to do for our employees, and we will give you X amount of days to like get your feet under you is what you really want to see. And it really did just feel like they went straight to press release
Yeah.
with this information.
Uh,
So
and it's unfortunately, I feel like it's going to get a little worse before it gets better. Not just for the retailers, the mom and pop shops, or just the sun shops who are out there doing what they love and running their own business, but also for the artists who, like you said, are worried about delayed payments because their products, the things that they're working on aren't going out, but also because a lot of the cancellation of the different um, conventions that are going on this year, all the way. I just recently read that along with NYCC, well, not NYCC. I don't think they've canceled that yet, but the more of the summer
Emerald
cons.
City did
Yeah,
way back when.
ECCC.
Yeah, ECC, Emerald City Comic Con.
Yeah, ECC. And then some of the other like gaming, the big gaming and anime conventions have since canceled. So like E3, Gamescom, a lot of places where um, artists and independent artists like make their money during the convention circuit, they're more than likely going to miss out on some income right there. And the people who help them, or the people who print um, their independent comics, their individual drawings, their buttons, their T-shirts, all of the kind of swag that they go to sell. Um, they, at least for the foreseeable future, for the next 3 to 5 months, they won't have the opportunity to do so in such a large gathering where people come, with cash ready to pay. So
Yep. Well,
it'll be
and
interesting to see how that transitions for people.
yes. And also, it gets even harder as we talk about the system, of mail, which is now what they're having to rely on for those of them who have the ability, who already had the product to be able to sell online. Um, it's going to be a tough situation as we see. This is really going to affect change in how people gather. I think right after official quarantines stop being the norm, and it stops being such a state mandated thing, I think we're going to see a lot of people going back to a lot of things. People like me who are desperate to get out of their house are going to want to go to movie theaters, and all of those sort of things, which I think is good and it's good revenue. But I think I think even if we see companies like movie theaters shift so less people can go to and be in the same sitting and there's more space and maybe airlines make more space, I think we're still going to see cycles of this, and it's really going to affect the sort of gatherings we're used to seeing,
Hmm.
at least until 2022.
I agree. I still remember like thinking to myself like way earlier on before the this year's Olympics were canceled, thinking to myself, "Oh my gosh, what are we going to do with the Olympics this year?" Because it's something that I know myself and millions of people around the world actually enjoy watching the Summer Olympics, and not to
Mm-hmm.
mention the hundreds or thousands of people who dedicate their entire lives just to compete.
Yeah.
And it will be returning in 2021, hopefully But still,
Yeah,
it's
it's going to be so hard because you've got people who, you know, worked so hard to get into this one. How's the qualification working? Like, it's sports and it's competition, so it might not be the same people who are invited this year get to go in 2021, and
mhm.
hopefully that's not the case. But it's I thought about that when I read about that. I was just like, it's it's Niall Horan saying, "Oh God, I couldn't have asked for a harder time to put out a second album," or
Yeah.
whatever the paraphrase of the
Yeah,
his
well,
tweet was. It's
but I mean, I hate to say it, but like athletics, especially hardcore competition athletics like that, is very time sensitive. There's a reason
mhm,
why the majority of, say, the gymnastics team is between the ages of, like, 15 and like 22, and not, like 35 to 40. Not to say that 35 to 40-year-olds could not do it and could not compete to an upper level, but just like physically, there's a reason why most of these competitors are younger, because that is considered to be, the prime of your physical condition.
yep,
And of course, there are people who are out there every day who prove that, you can go longer and stronger and still be at the height of your game. But it does take a toll on your body. And yeah, I'm sure it was really disappointing for a lot of people to hear that that the Olympics this year were going to be canceled. And I like you said, I'm really interested in seeing how they're going to um, do the invitations for 2021.
yes,
And also, on like a really selfish personal note, I was so invested in Japan hosting the Olympics this year. I know they were going to give me one of the best like openings and closings that we've seen. I just knew they were.
yeah, oh yeah. Well, and did they say they were going to change, or were they going to still be the hosts for it?
I'm pretty sure there's.
Presumably,
I'm pretty sure they're still going to be the host for it. Like, I'm 99% sure that they'll still be hosting it next year.
yeah,
So that's not going. I mean, the infrastructure is already in place. Like, that is not going to change. The only thing that they would be able to do would probably, like, this is just like as an aside, but if something, were to happen on, let's say, on planet Earth 2, and the country of not Japan suffered some kind of grievous thing that they couldn't host the Olympics, I think the only thing they would be able to do is go to a country that had hosted it previously, whose
and
centers,
probably recently.
and recently, whose centers were still, in good shape.
Yeah,
Um, so they would probably have to go back, to the last 4 years, who hosted it, or maybe even 8 years ago. But I don't imagine they'd be able to go beyond that.
yeah, because I think the infrastructure would still be in place, but it's still they're not necessarily built to last, to my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And gosh, I still remember. Well, I vaguely remember when Atlanta hosted the Olympics, and I know that a lot of those places are still there, but a lot of those places are, now gone because of just time. And so, you know, yeah, the Georgia Dome is still there, but they've moved like the baseball field to somewhere else, like all that kind of stuff.
Well, and standards for certain things change. Like the pool that was at the university I went to for a long time in I think particularly the 90s and the early 2000s was used for Olympic preparation and like practice just because the altitude is so high up there. So
Mm,
they had an Olympic style pool, but while I was there, it was no longer qualifying for the standards. So they rebuilt it when they were rebuilding the whole, like it was part of the whole decision to rebuild the entire health center up there was, well, this was our main summer attraction to athletes, so why don't we make it functional now. So
yeah.
fun.
Well, before I derailed us, you actually had an amazing transition there, Kay. An amazing transition to our next topic, which is also pandemic adjacent. I know earlier I referred to it to the Great American Pandemic, and that's just because my historical brain is trying to like coin a phrase to like. I said the Great American Shutdown rather is
Yes,
trying to coin a phrase, even though. But I'm not so ethnocentristic that I don't understand that the entire world is shut down. So if anyone, any of the 10 people who find this, listen to this, I understand that.
she means Great American Shutdown because we're existing in this current shutdown as it happens. Not necessarily that we're the only ones shut down. Everyone's certainly got their own way of they're approaching this right now.
Hmm.
So
But you really nicely transitioned us into another industry that's seeing its own pandemic, plans come together and like figure themselves out in real time, and that's the film industry. And Kay mentioned that right now movie theaters are shut down. Many people are stir crazy and they want to get out and do things, and the movies are still one of um, a worldwide pastime. Uh, but to feed that hunger, studios are now releasing their. Well, studios are doing one of two things. Either they are delaying releases for some of their larger tentpole um, movies that are supposed to be coming out later this year. For example, with Disney, Mulan was pushed back. Um, there's
Wonder
talk
Woman.
Wonder Woman is being pushed back. So those kind of really big budget blockbuster movies have been pushed. Or they are releasing them direct to on demand video.
Yes. Which there's a whole conversation to be had about the pricing for that. I understand. I had a conversation with someone particularly about Invisible Man, um, and a lot of these are on demand. Are they're what 19.99 to rent them?
Which is the
Is it rent them?
Yes, and that's usually the price to purchase the movie.
Yes. And so a lot of, some places are saying, well, this is how much it would cost to get you in the seat, but it's very specific to households. This
Hmm.
is taking into equation the idea of a household paying to watch a movie as opposed to an individual watching a movie because, I hate to break it to the movie industry, but I went to a Harkins recently and my ticket was like $8. So it's not the norm. It's normally, a lot of us I feel like don't do the whole movie experience. It's gotten so expensive over the years, like $12 for a ticket, $8 for a soda, and then like the smallest popcorn you can ever get, unless you want to spend an additional $12 to get like a regular popcorn and a regular soda. They're right. It can cost up $20, but I think so much of us have gotten used to it being so expensive, and therefore having to kind of work around that in our own ways.
Well, girl, so here's
That
my thing. If
yeah, go for it.
Well, no, I was just gonna say. So after I hate to drop my very tiny. Well, I lived in New York card, but I lived in New York, and so my ticket was, $20.
Ugh.
And so hearing that the cost was 19.99 wasn't an issue because if you live in a two-person household, dude, at least two-person household, you're getting a deal.
Yes.
If you live in a more than two-person household, then you might as well just get it. Until I
Yes.
heard that it was on demand only and it was 19.99 for a rental. And then I was like,
Yes.
"What? No."
No, and if I was buying it, that's something else entirely. When I first heard about it, I was like, okay, well, in the case of Invisible Man, I was like, okay, I get it. It just came out. It's an action, it's not an action, it's a thriller. And honestly, it had just come out right before theaters started having to shut down or go to smaller venue sizes. So I was like, you know what, it makes sense, that they would just have it up at full price cost, at least for the first couple of months. No, it's a rental, and when you look at it that way, it's just, it's so much, especially considering they're all $20. You know, you're basically making a decision, especially as everybody, you know, where a lot of us are moving to less hours or no hours, or hoping that this, the stimulus check isn't a one-time thing kind of situation. That's a lot of money to expect people to pay on top of all of the things that they're probably paying for or not, or, all of the things they're having to let go that would be a nice distraction, because money is really tight for everybody. So I think
Hmm.
if it was a purchase, especially, or, it was, more than a one-time viewing and you could share it with people, I think that'd be an entirely different conversation. But because it's a one-time rental for $20 without and you're still just in your house, there's none of the experience of it being on the big screen, which is half the reason we put up with these prices, or
Hmm.
the sound or any of those things. I mean, half of the people are probably going to be watching it on their phones, frankly, and $20 to watch a movie on your phone is just excessive.
Yeah. And I'm just gonna put it out there. I am not a movie from home person at all. I've tried it and it is just not me anymore. TV shows I will binge like nobody's business. Movies can't do it.
I can't
So
either.
so
Either
like
I can't bring myself to watch them, or I get up in the middle of them because I have something else to do.
mhm. Like I actually am kind of, well, we'll talk about Disney Plus in a second because that kind of goes into a topic that I think fits in here. But I do have Disney Plus, and I have DC Universe, and I have Netflix, and I have Amazon Prime, and I have Hulu, and I have no money. So, but seriously, the I tried to watch Onward, and
Oh.
it was, I mean, it was cute. I don't does It was a cute movie about families and brothers, and I was sitting there thinking, okay, we have Lilo and Stitch for a movie about sisters. Um, we have, oh, Brave for a film about mothers and daughters. Did we have any other films about brothers? I don't think so. From
Brother
Disney
Bear.
Pixar. Oh, Brother Bear, that's right. Okay. All right.
I
So
mean,
this
quote unquote, we, we could spend a whole day talking about Brother Bear.
we can. We can.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but anyway, I was digressing there. But yeah, I watched it in like 4 sittings on Disney Plus, and some of it I just skipped through. And if I were in the theater, I would have been 100% engaged. Like it was a sweet film. Towards the end, I was tearing up, because I have a heart. But but the yeah, but sitting in my home trying to watch it, I was just not engaged at all. At all. So, like it is rough, and I'm just wondering, I'm really curious to see what we're not going to see any type of like monetary like numbers around this, I'm sure, but I am really curious to see if film studios have been able to recoup any of their projected profits from these few films that were released. Um,
Mhm. And they were big ones. They were movies that were going to get people in. I mean, some of them, like I think Emma was going to do real well.
hmm
As was Invisible Man was getting amazing reviews right up from the top. Um, and it's going to be hard to see, especially because we're, all of Hollywood and all of production for even reality TV shows is off right now. Like, for example, I know for a fact that even all of the Teen Mom shows aren't filming right now. Production is shut down for everything. So we're looking at a situation in which companies are losing money on even movies that were projected to, and in any conventional circumstances, would have done well. They are having to try and recoup those losses through an unconventional means of getting it to people and getting money out of people for it.
Mhm.
And so, and I think without a doubt the economy is going to shrink, and that's also going to affect studios and what they decide to put on screen. So we're going to see a lot of change, I think, at the end of the day with regard to, yeah, I think there are going to be things that we're going to go into production that get shelved that we don't find out got shelved, for one.
Mhm.
And I dread, frankly, the day that we're going to get 1,400 different think pieces and thought provoking bottle episodes about characters being stuck in quarantine. Um, though it's hard to imagine, speaking of an example, um, I was trying to imagine what Bob's Burgers specifically would look like in a quarantine episode. And I couldn't decide if that would be the worst thing I'd ever had to experience, or at least in the format of it being Bob's Burgers, I could handle it. Um, and I still haven't decided. I still have no clue, and I have no clue what that would look like. But like, what do you do in that writer's room? You have to make one of two choices. You either make the decision to ignore it, or you Law and Order the towers coming down 9/11 style, and I think it's going to be a very interesting time in media, and also possibly a very boring time in media, whether or not we get any of those to go to production, or it's just less stuff than we were expecting, because we are definitely going to hit a point where there's not there, we're going to, depending on how long it takes studios to put things out, going to eventually run out of stuff that was already pre-production, and we'll all just be waiting for new stuff.
Mhm.
I think this will be we already thought we were in the heyday of podcasts. I really think this is going to be a return to the the early 2010s popularity of podcasts, because I think it's just about the only thing that's in production right now that knows how to produce it. Um,
And can do it remotely.
exactly.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that because as another aside, one of the things that has been going on in one of my um I can't call it a fandom, but that's been going on online right now in the hip hop community is the recent verses. I know I talked to you about this offline, but there's been a recent versus series that's been taking place on Instagram that first started with the producers Timbaland and Swizz Beats, and they just did, you know, an hour or so of music where they went back and forth playing their hits in a battle type format, and then the people who were tuned in and listening were deciding who won the round, who had the best beat, who had the best feature, those kind of conversations, which is one of those things that at least in the hip hop community is like always being discussed. Who's the best? Who's the greatest? Who's doing the thing right now? And so that's been going on, and recently um, they've had some really interesting ones. I've only caught one while it was going on, and that was Little John and T Pain, which was the first exercise I've had really since this quarantine's been going on. But they also did like a song battle or songwriters battle one where they had Jonte Evans and Neo, and which was really interesting because I didn't know who Jonte was. A lot of people who weren't in the industry knew that this was the person who wrote a lot of your favorite hits. Like he wrote and produced Mariah Carey's "We Belong Together." He did songs for Aaliyah. He did songs for Chris Brown. So a lot of people got to witness him. And then they also had another battle between two legendary producers, RZA from the Wu Tang Clan and Premier, who did songs for like Biggie and Nas and Jay Z. So it's just been really interesting to see how that's coming across. Um, and there's been discussions on different artists' podcasts and between artists' Instagram lives that they've just been hosting. Um, Like how can we monetize this? Should we monetize this? How do we monetize this? How do we bring this into an actual series? Because it's almost like history in a way. And then there's the conversation that's going on. Um, Excuse me, I'm trying not to sneeze. It's about to make me lose my train of thought. Um, oh gosh, I hate that feeling. Okay, I'm sorry. Well, all right, anyway, so there's that conversation, and then there's the other end of the celebrity equation where the celebrities are doing more things like Instagram. Um, I saw a clip where Roger Federer started a challenge, um, and he's just hitting the ball against the wall for like training. But of course, a lot of people were doing that, and then Sean Combs, P Diddy had a huge dance-a-thon this past weekend. I think with many, many, many celebrities. Like Drake was on there, J Lo was on there, Lizzo was on there, his kids were on there, LeBron was on there, all of them dancing, all of them talking, and they raised, I think the last count was around $3 million for um, equipment for hospitals.
Oh, amazing.
hmm So that was really cool. So there's just been, a lot of, again, a lot of talk about if you're not going through the studios, how can artists, music artists specifically, but how can artists use this time to really shine and figure out ways so they can control their content and control their own money?
Yeah, so like Troye Sivan was saying, he was just going to drop his own music sans studio because this is not the time in which most studios probably want them dropping albums.
hmm
Um, but also, not that I have more to say on what I'm about to segue into for a second, but just a note from something I saw was that Ticketmaster is trying to or plans to change its policy so that way they don't have to refund tickets for a situation like this ever again.
See,
So that's some bad.
that is some bad in there, but and I really didn't mean to make this all about Corona, and we do have topics that are outside of that, but I will mention that South by Southwest did
Yes.
not refund tickets, and it's in their contract, or not their contract, but their like terms and conditions or whatever, that like even an act, they will not refund even for an act of God, which is what this quarantine situation is. Um, and so like, how do we feel about that? Because I understand that as a business, like convention business, you still have to, in advance, pay for, or make your deposits for like the venue and the artists and the speakers and the this and this and this and this. So even if no one shows up, you've probably already spent the majority of your, you know, the majority of the money that you raised for the year, like 6 months before the event actually happens. Um,
Yes.
on the other hand, no one is getting anything out of it who actually gave the money.
Yep.
Because you're not going to be able to attend. You're not going to get to see any, like it's just, and it's not like it's cheap.
No. And that's one of those ones where, particularly in the case of Ticketmaster, which, talking about monopolies again, all of the companies, I think, other than Eventbrite, basically, I mean, there's some other ones, but I think Eventbrite isn't through Ticketmaster. Um,
But
but
Live
they're,
Nation
but I,
is.
yeah, Live Nation is, Ticket Force is. There's a couple ones where it's that tricky monopoly thing where it's almost the same name. Um, has what the company has already named itself. But this is one of those things. It's like the question we're having about bailout money for airlines. This is the reason they were given that money the first couple times around, or this is why they should be making enough money to cover situations like this in particular, as opposed to probably just taking the money as bonuses for people in the upper echelon. And maybe we don't want to get too far into this. Don't make this a whole COVID down with monopolies
Look,
episode. But I do frankly feel that I think there's I think there's a difference, and I think it's really interesting how Coachella, I believe Coachella, was the one that I read where a lot of the people who make the stuff for Coachella, like the sets and everything that people use, are now making masks and things that they can to give to doctors.
hmm
And if you've ever been through Coachella or the city near Coachella in Arizona or in California, it's on the border of Arizona almost. Boy, is there nothing else there but a place that puts on shows.
yeah,
So it's interesting to see, like, Coachella is weed and barren land, so that way people can smoke weed while listening to music. That is all that the city of Coachella is. Frankly, the last time went through it, my friend said, "Oh, it's a city now." So it's a tough situation. Everybody is handling it differently. Nobody is handling it nearly as bad, it feels like sometimes, than uh, Force
master.
Ticketmaster is. Thank you. Yeah. And I don't know. It's gonna be interesting seeing what happens in the aftermath, because there are just some things that best avoided, is how we're going to treat it, I think, going
hmm
into the future.
Yeah.
But since we were talking about music and the different situations musicians are going to have to deal with, especially because this is that we're going to have other socialization issues. Like that is the projective, especially since we won't have a vaccine for at least 2 more years. Like that is, it's not a question, really. And so changing your policy like that doesn't only just stop people from buying tickets, but it messes with the amount of money that a musician can make because, and
hmm
frankly, this is one of those situations that I'd love to hear from a musician whose tickets have gone through Ticketmaster, because when you break down the numbers, most musicians who are not of Jay-Z's level or something like that tend to make most of their money out of going to having concerts and
hmm
selling merch at concerts.
Yep. And that is exactly it. So that's why you can have a person who maybe has, I don't know, one hit on the radio, not even like a number one on the Billboard charts, but just one hit on the radio, and then have them go out and become a thousandaire after 1 year, and then a millionaire after a second year, on the strength of one single,
Yes.
um, because they're out there touring and they're busting their butt touring. Um, One of the podcasts that I like to listen to during the week, and I listen to a bunch, but I actually like listening to the Joe Budden podcast. Joe Budden is a one of those hip hop, or rappers from the early aughts who had like a he didn't have a he had a one hit, like huge hit wonder, and then he went on to continue his career. Fell out of love with the music industry, um, fell out of his group, and eventually like shifted into a media personality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so he's has artist artist knowledge, um, production knowledge, and then he's there with some other people who have been in the industry. Like is one guy's brother is someone who's deeply embedded in the industry as like an agent, I think. One person worked with Sony Records and other places, and then another one is a um, gosh, I can't forget. I don't know. I'm gonna totally mess this up because I don't know his official title. And I don't just want to call him a sound guy, but he's not a producer. But he's one of the artist. He's one of the people who like does studio time with artists and mixes music and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but anyway, yeah, it's just really interesting because they do go on tangents about this and um, how valuable artists are, how underpaid artists are, and while it may not seem like it because when you look at the lavish lives of people, you're looking at the like thousands of people that made it and not the millions of people that didn't,
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
that, and I maybe this is just me, a giant 90s baby, but anytime I think about the music industry, I always think about the True Hollywood Stories and the rock doc about Lisa Left Eye Lopez from TLC.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
Because they did a whole breakdown on how after Crazy Sexy Cool, they had to file for bankruptcy because at a certain point, um, they were paying for everything. They were paying for their music videos to be produced. They were paying for production. And once you get thousands and thousands of dollars in the hole, and then you have a music, we tend to think that or just assume that, music companies foot a lot of those bills. And frankly, no, they'll charge artists by the hour for it.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah. A lot of feelings about the music industry
Oh
for
yeah,
someone who does not make music in any way. Uh,
but
probably won't get into the music industry.
but when you love it and you care about and you care like it, you're a fan, you care about the artist, and when you hear about their struggles and the hardships that they go through just to do the thing that they love, and you're a creative person, you may not be a music person, but you're a creative person, so the empathy is 100% there.
Thank you.
100% there. Like, no, I get it. I'm just like, ugh, this sucks. And this is coming from someone who's like the closest I've ever been in the music industry is like marching in a college band, Like that's it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that kind of sucks. Um, so we were talking about streaming and the music industry, and I have a segue for this. One of my friends told me earlier today that Netflix has eclipsed Disney in terms of market share value as of today.
That is interesting. I'm really surprised, especially because a lot of people were thinking that Disney was going to, uh, due to them having all of the, especially all the Marvel product now that they were going to eclipse Netflix, but I I honestly don't feel like I should be that surprised actually, now that I think about it.
Well,
But
let me
go
make
ahead.
sure that I'm saying. No, I'm just going to say let me pull this message up so I can 100% make sure that I'm saying this correctly because maybe it's not market share, but it is something. So give me 1 second because I'm pulling it up. And it was Netflix has passed Disney today in market worth.
Oh,
Yep.
I mean they have more things, and there's a whole conversation to be had about some of the choices Disney is making with Disney Plus, like with things such as the Lizzie McGuire show that was supposed to be happening that is more or less officially canceled at this point, due to the
Look.
fact that they didn't want it to be non-family friendly. And I understand in some ways, but in other ways, I think Disney is really counting out the fact that a lot of their fan base is older, is in their 20s. You do have kids. I'm not saying that that's not the case. It's kids and it's nostalgia.
Yep.
So I think by discounting that, they are really cutting themselves down at the knees by not choosing to make more diverse family content.
Well,
I'm sure there's a way to do the Lizzie McGuire show and just not have it feel like it's for only 13-year-olds.
my biggest thing right now is, and my brother and I actually have this conversation all the time, is where are the shows, Disney? cause you, cause you promised us like, we got the Mandalorian. You promised us all of these Marvel shows. You promised us, some of these other things. And yeah, right now the production has to halt on many of these things. But where where are all the shows that they promised people?
Yeah,
Because
shouldn't I? They should have Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Is that one even out yet?
no, I don't think it was going to come out until I'm thinking that like something like that probably wasn't even going to drop until San Diego Comic Con. Um,
Oh, that makes sense.
but it's more than likely going to be canceled this year, and they're just holding on to a lot of things. And yes, the Disney catalog is very vast. I mean, it's as a studio, as a production company, they've been making media since the 30s. Is that when Steamboat Willie come out?
Oh, uh, yeah, I can't speak to that factually, but
It's
that
somewhere
sounds
in there.
right.
It's somewhere in there. I know. I don't think it's the 20s. I really do think like Steamboat Willie came out in like 1930, like one or something crazy
That's
like that. But anyway, um, but there's just to me, there's not enough stuff on Disney Plus that I want to watch. And every once in a while, nostalgia will get me, and I'll be on there and I'll watch like the Shaggy DA, and I'll remember that I was in like preschool and I saw this movie on a thing called Laserdisc. But um but yeah, other than that, it's like what am I here to watch? Nature shows? I do love nature shows, but where are the things that you promised me? It's been a long time since y'all dropped, and you haven't given me those things that you promised us. And
yeah.
just to put a cap on this real quick, because I did find the article. The current price of Netflix stock is $426.75 per share, giving Netflix a current market capitalization of 187.3 billion, putting it just over Disney's 186.6 billion.
Yeah, well, and speaking of Disney, I'm really not trying to make this a pandemic show, but a lot of the news that's coming out is all related to this.
Mhm.
Um, but Bob Iger was retiring, and he is coming back, actually. He's coming back out of retirement because, not to say My Brother and Me is a factual show that I should take facts from, but fun fact, did you know Disneyland in a regular year has like 300 like thousand feral cats that roam around or something? Like there are a lot of feral cats that just hang out in that park. And for other reasons that are like when they were announcing that they were going to stay open initially, but they were going to clean the park, we were all like, that's not true. There is no way that that park is getting cleaned up enough to be up to like whose standards. But nonetheless, yeah, he's coming back, because he's got to figure out they've got all of these theme parks in different countries, including the one in China that are, not usable right now,
Mhm.
and they had to stop production on streaming, which was already probably a big gamble for the company. Movies that were supposed to come out and be big blockbusters, the article, which I didn't read enough of to really bring this up other than tangentially, um, basically implied that, he was coming back because the company needed someone who knew something about who had run the company before, because so much is going to have to change for Disney, which I feel is like the capitalist version of the Waffle House being closed. Like Disney isn't closed for a hurricane, and neither does Waffle House, and yet this is where we're at.
Mhm.
And it's interesting. But also, yeah, come on, Disney Plus. Though to be fair, all the things that I want to watch on Disney Plus are all of the old Disney Channel original movies, the pre-High School Musical ones that you can usually still find on YouTube.
Oh, I know which
Um,
ones you're talking about. I
yeah, I
know.
had a fun time the other day because this is a fun diverge. It's not pandemic related. Trying to explain that the aesthetic for the old Disney Channel original movie was um, biopics about women in sports. You know, there was the motocross one about Alex, and then there were the two white girl twins who went on to be in the WNBA. There were the cheerleaders. I'm sure there were a lot more, but there was the girls biopic about sports, and then there was the brunette, slightly I hate to say pudgy, but like the realistic teenage boy, I should actually say. None of our Zac Efrons out there. The realistic teenage boy becoming a leprechaun, becoming a mermaid,
Oh,
and
I
winning a
remember that one.
steakhouse. And that was the yeah. Describing Timothy Omenson. I almost always want to say Oliphant, and those are different people largely. But Timothy Omenson being an evil leprechaun who plays basketball against another kid because he's turned his mother, and his grandfather into leprechauns against their will uh, because of a curse. Oh, it, it's one of those things where
Magic.
you want to
Magic.
put someone else through them because you watch them so many times as a teen at like obnoxious hours of the night.
No, well, I predate you a little bit, and so I'm sitting here remembering the film My Date with the President's Daughter, and I'm like, is that a Disney
Yes.
Channel film or is that just something that was on the Family Channel? Because those things kind of blur together for me.
Well, so I think that was around the time the Family Channel would have come under Disney's purview because the main character from the boy from that is Eric from Boy Meets World, who is
Hmm.
also the voice of the boy
Ron
in Kim
Stoppable.
Possible. There you go. Thank you. I was like, I know it's a pun, but I get God knows what it is. You remember his naked mole rat, and that's about it.
Girl,
But
that was
yeah,
my
so
jam. I loved Kim Possible.
but so I would assume that he was already on Disney's contract to do that one. Um, yes,
Hmm.
yeah, the date with the president's daughter. Um, just all I don't know if you remember this one, but I think the oldest one I remember is the one about imaginary friends who, if you forget them the wrong way, become the monster under the bed. Like they become nightmare creatures. And I think about that one approximately like once a month. Uh,
No, I don't remember that. But actually, I really don't remember that one. But when you started talking about it, I thought it was the one with Fred Savage, but that was like way older. Um,
mm-mm. I don't think it's the same one.
yeah. But there's I think it's no, it's called Little Monsters, and it starred Fred Savage when Fred Savage was like the only kid in
That's different.
movies.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, that's a different one. Talk about unlikely brothers, Fred Savage and the one who
Ben
played
Savage.
Corey. There we go. Thank you. I
Oh
always forget
yeah.
they're brothers.
Yeah, man. Me too. One day we're going to talk about my favorite television show that came out in like the past 7 or 8 years and how um, it was a diamond in the rough and it never went anywhere. But we'll talk about that later.
Yes.
Um, we're going to go back to Netflix and talk about maybe one of the reasons why that's not COVID-19 related, why Netflix has increased in value, and that would be the docu series dramedy
The
Tiger
almost
King.
Yep, the almost reality TV show documentary Tiger King. Listen, I have not had so much jaw dropping during while watching this as I have since I watched The Jinx, which I even knew the secret about The Jinx. Like, it's yeah, Robert Durst. It's one of those. Um, it's a pretty common joke. John Mulaney doesn't know how to not make jokes about him, and things like that. But Tiger King had a similar feeling every episode, because I have watched the whole thing, had some new surprise that they didn't know how to not unveil. And it it's very interesting. And I wonder how, it's very much in the vein of a lot of the reality TV shows we're getting now, where there's a lot of spectacle to them. Um, I think one of the maybe the earlier, newer ones that really exemplifies how Netflix documentaries are kind of changing the format would maybe be Making a Murderer.
Mm.
Um, they're these longer form ones that really want you to question who is right in this situation, and do it sometimes make you question whether or not the documentarian was wholly objective in what they were doing. I think in my opinion with Tiger King, I think they tried to be to be more or less as objective as I think you can be if you're hanging out with the Tiger King. Because Joe Exotic is just so much. Um, what a wild show. A lot of people are making jokes that if Halloween, which is finally a Saturday this year, finally gets to happen, um, just everyone is going to come out of quarantine with a really interesting Joe Exotic idea for Halloween, unless something big usurps it. But
I don't see it right
oh
now.
my gosh.
I sincerely do not see it right now.
Rob Lowe, I couldn't tell if he dressed up like him or if he took pictures where he put his face on top of Joe Exotic's face. But even he posted pictures of himself on Instagram as Joe Exotic. It's becoming a real cultural kind of like mark, one of those things where we all know, or whether you watched it or not, you're going to have to find out that Carol Baskins says, "Hello, you cool cats and kittens," whenever she's introducing her own web videos, and just things like that.
Mm-mm.
And it is a wild ride. It has some very serious trigger warnings that should be addressed. One of which is that there is a questionably a accidental suicide in it,
Mm.
which is not something most people talk about because it comes out of the left, like swinging wildly at you in like the fourth or fifth episode, and you're just in so much shock that you just can't believe it happened. Um, but it's a wild show. It's wild to watch it during all of this because I definitely had a lot of questions about how this was affecting the businesses of the people, you know, who have cat rescues and exotic animal zoos, and it is affecting most of them. Um, but it's one of those wild situations where you suddenly remember that, oh, there are some wildly terrible people out there in
Oh
this
yeah.
world,
Oh
and they
yeah.
are just there, and they are messing with each other, and like they are, they think they're good people. And I think we're going to go in a lot of patterns just about Tiger King due to the fact that there's not much to watch that's quite as insane as this is.
Yeah, it
You know,
is a car wreck. I haven't seen it yet, but I have heard and seen enough clips enough to know that it is a car wreck.
I am certainly trying to talk about it without giving spoilers for whether, for those 10 people who are listening to this but haven't necessarily seen it. Um, but I had very specific thoughts on the case that they present, and whether or not Joe should be in jail. I did not expect to have very strong feelings about exotic animals and how I don't think people should keep them as pets, frankly. Um,
And they should not.
but uh, I also feel strange about the cultural reaction, we're having to it. I think specifically Carol Baskins, um, she definitely did the documentary with an ulterior motive, thinking that this was going to be better for her than it was going to be for Joe, someone that she has had tenuous legal battles for or with, and who is part of the main thrust of why they made a documentary in the first place, other than the fact that Joe Exotic is just such a wild character. Um, but it's interesting to see that one of the things that happen that you see in the documentary is that I almost want to put quotations around documentary because it feels so much more like a reality show, but instead of you having to watch like 7 seasons of a reality show, somebody has put together a really like cleaned up, here are the greatest hits moments of it, which is part of the appeal, but it's also part of what I'm trying dancing around the point of, which is, Joe spends a lot of his time and spent a lot of his time in real life in litigation with her about whether or not he should have a zoo, and also coming for her personally, and vice versa. Like, frankly, there are things that she did in having won a suit against him that were, from the outside appearance, very spiteful and very personal. Um, but one of the things he brought up was that she has a husband who went missing back in I want to say the 90s, but you should just watch the documentary instead of looking for me for the factual timeline. But he brings up the fact that he believes that she killed her husband. And now it's kind of being treated like a cultural, a cultural thing, like
Mm-hmm.
you don't see anybody talking about Carol Baskins without talking about how she probably killed her husband. And it's an interesting, court of public opinion where we're all stuck inside with only a handful of things that we feel like we can watch, and so we're making judgments on these things. Um,
But we all know
and
that Carol killed her husband. I'm just going to put it
oh,
out there. And I say that because, as someone who had only heard that fact, I was like, oh, yeah, she's totally killed him and fed him to the cats.
I mean, he went missing, and went missing after he kind of wanted to take her out of the will, but didn't do that yet. It's very they really are just like, here's a whole episode about Carol. My bigger problem with her is the revelation that she doesn't have anyone that she pays or is on staff at her big cat rescue. She only uses volunteers. People
Mm.
volunteer to do the work to keep her rescue going, which is currently closed, but people are taking care of the cats, was like an update she gave after the documentary dropped about how COVID is affecting her rescue, and I cannot believe the degree of civility that I have just been speaking about Tiger King with, because I frankly watched all 6 episodes in a binge, and sat wild-eyed on my couch, just in shock with so many thoughts, but not least of all that I think all of the people involved should probably do jail time for trafficking in exotic animals, because if you come out of that documentary with anything, it's that nobody should have a tiger, and frankly, if a tiger bites your face off, you did that. You did that. Like,
Mhm.
tigers are meant to bite our faces off, and I don't know why anyone would expect any differently. They are huge, and they have the same temperament as a house cat, but worse. So
Mhm.
that's kind of where, like, if you keep these animals and you get hurt, you have asked for this. In this one situation, uh, it's also just really depressing, um, really interesting. Uh, Also, people did some digging, and one of the characters, quote unquote characters, and I don't say this in the fact that they're infactual, I say this because they are just, you
They are
couldn't
just
invent them
characters.
for a TV show and make them better than they are. Doc Antle was the person who provided the Python for Britney Spears for her
Oh,
MTV video.
oh, for the Slave for
Yes.
You video?
Yes. Well, for the MTV performance at
Oh,
the
okay.
MTV Music Awards, the big yellow python.
Mhm.
Um, and the year before, Carol Baskins was sitting next to her at the music awards, just the year
What?
before. Yeah, there are people have footage of that. Um, so what a small, weird animal world it was at that time. Also, Doc Antle, I believe, provided the animals for the Eddie Murphy Doctor Doolittle, as well as for Ace Ventura.
What?
Yes. Now, this is secondhand information I'm getting that I have not researched, but that was what I had been told. So,
It is
uh,
a small ass world.
yeah, especially in the big cats world, and I think it's worth a watch, and I think it is very good. Take your mind off of it, entertainment, but it's also just it's depressing. It's not unlike watching reality TV. If you can't handle watching Real Housewives, I would highly not recommend this because it will just drive you nuts.
Which
But
is
it's kind of yeah,
probably
go ahead.
why I haven't watched it because I
That's fine.
don't like reality TV. But I also am nosy and I love murder
Mhm.
mysteries. So this feels like it has everything that I want, yet nothing I need. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, and that's absolutely why you should watch it. It's also why anyone should watch The Jinx with about Robert Durst, which is people investigating the well-known mysterious deaths around him and the clear murder of a neighbor that he. I mean, I'm pretty sure he copped to it as an accidental death that, but he did desecrate a body and he copped to the desecration of a body. So, like, Robert Durst is a, if you don't know who he is, he's a very weird man. But The Jinx is a documentary in a similar vein, but more about like a rich guy from Connecticut who has a lot of weird situations surrounding him. Um, who at the end of the documentary, the reason the documentary is famous and the reason I watched it and the reason why I sat there with the same slack jaw look on my face that I did with Tiger King is he at one point at the end of the documentary goes into the bathroom and starts talking to himself about how the filmmakers know everything and just be cool. You know, you haven't copped to anything. They don't know that you killed those people, and you're just like, what?
Mm.
Because he forgot he was mic'd. He went to the bathroom and forgot he was mic'd, and he's saying these things on mic, and it's just fascinating. You don't want to look away. You know, you watch all six episodes in one go. So.
Huh. Interesting. Well, I'm going to put that on the list.
Speaking of lists, should we talk about something neither of us know much about at all? And Dune, which is going to be on everyone's list as soon as it
Yes.
comes out.
I would love to talk about Dune. I have a love affair with Dune in that I saw it when I was itty bitty and living overseas, and my mom had it on tape in the late '80s, and I was an itty bitty person at that point in time. I
Hmm.
wasn't even like I was just like kindergarten. I don't even think I was in elementary school at that point because I don't think I started elementary school until we got back to the States. Anyway, I digress. And so I remember like certain scenes from the original Dune series. I remember the guy with the really vivid blue eyes,
Hmm.
who was now I can know is Kyle MacLachlan. I remember Sting as being Fade Ruatha, I think is how you say his name. I remember Paul Atreides' sister killing the Baron Harkonnen. And I remember riding characters riding on the back of giant worms. And so those that's what I remembered about Dune. Then they did a Dune remake on the Sci-Fi Channel in like the late '90s, early aughts. That was allegedly I don't think I actually completed that one, but was allegedly more closely related to the source material. And then I had one conversation with my dad about Dune, where he spoiled everything for me. I didn't mind at all because I wasn't going to read the novels at that point. But he spoiled everything to me. And spoilers to anyone who didn't read the books, told me what happens to Paul at the end of the series. And you want to talk about Tiger King Wild? Imagine your hero becoming a giant sentient worm. So,
Yes, I had heard about that.
yeah,
Wild.
wild. But we talk about all of this, or I bring all of this up to say that there's going to be a Dune film coming out in December of this year as the big holiday blockbuster, sci-fi holiday blockbuster. Since there's not a, as far as I'm aware, there wasn't a Marvel film slated to come out, and Star Wars, who had pretty much booked up the past couple of
Well,
years.
Black Widow was supposed to come out in November, I want to say. Maybe, and I think it's been moved to December, or it was supposed to come out this summer and it's been moved to December. Something was supposed to happen with Black Widow, which is a movie that all of us keep forgetting about because we don't think it's real and we're not going to believe it till we're actually sitting in the theaters. So, but yes, it is going to be the big, I think the big, not franchise, but the big brand that's coming out.
Yeah, that movie's not going to do what they want it to do. I'm just like, I will go back to Dune because I love the casting overall with it, but
Yes, yes, let's talk about it.
I'm just going to just do my little opinionated opinion right here and say the Black Widow film should have came a long time ago. It is
Mm-hmm.
unfair to Scarlett Johansson that they waited this long to produce her standalone film. If
Mm-hmm.
she if they had done it earlier, we wouldn't have had to have her star in some of the films that she starred in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking specifically of Ghost in the Shell, and I'm sure there's some others. Oh, that other one that she did, I can't remember right now. Um, and I don't, just from what I've seen in the trailer, I don't think the premise is good, honestly.
I the degree to which I am completely turned off at the prospect of a Black Widow movie, whereas I think in 2014 I was one of several people out there making fan playlists and different, I made yeah, I made fan casts. I was very excited at the prospect of a Black Widow movie with Scarlett Johansson. I was for a long time. I I'll just blaspheme right here. I don't understand Lost in Translation. I've never really enjoyed Lost in Translation, and that was kind of like the rubric of like what set her as like such an it girl. And since I didn't get it and I didn't really like it, that's the one she did with Bill Murray. That's about being in Tokyo, correct?
Hmm.
Um, uh, I was never a huge Scarlett Johansson fan until probably the second Iron Man. I didn't think that was an overall good movie, but I thought she was really good in it. But really, I think what sold me and what sold a lot of people was Captain America: Winter Soldier,
Yeah.
which I think was probably one of the last good MCU movies that wasn't an origin story.
Yeah.
Um, because the ones came after that I did like, but that was the last one that was part of the whole assembly phase. That was good. And she was very good in that. And that was when I was like, yeah, I really do hope that she gets her own movie. And after Civil War, I have little to no interest in watching a Marvel movie at this point.
Hmm.
But even if I did, I'd probably be going for Florence Pugh or the guy from Stranger Things. And even in that, uh, for example, someone sent me a fan cast for an actor I really like about having him be in the next version of Fantastic Four, which I really hope nobody does because let's just let go of the idea that we'll have a good Fantastic Four movie. Um,
Can we real quick on the Fantastic Four movie, because I love the first like half an hour of that film, like the beginning character establishment
are
parts
we
of that
talking
film.
about
I'm
Fan Fantastic?
I'm
Fan
talking
Fantastic?
No, I'm talking about the Fantastic Four film that had Michael B. Jordan in it.
Yeah, that's Fan Four Stick because the way
Okay.
they wrote it, the four is in the middle of the Fantastic.
Oh, okay, girl. I don't even remember all that. I just remember like the first 30 or so minutes of it was good because the actors in their roles could act. And I really liked I like the weird like body horror like not body horror but like almost body horror vibe that was going into the film. Like it just felt like a different genre than
Well,
just
they
the
had an
superhero
amazing
movie.
cast. Yeah,
And then they lost their way. But if they could
but
just those first 30 minutes, if
yeah.
just those first 30 minutes, give me that and I will be happy. They should have cut everything else out though.
Oh, for sure. But nonetheless, I was like, you're not getting, they're not getting me to a Marvel movie because the craft of a Marvel movie sucks. The craft of the Marvel movie is you write a script and then you give actors at best a whole page, but more likely just the lines that they had for that day, which is what they did with Captain Marvel, which is why once I realized that, I was like, oh, this is why all of the elements are here and I should like this, but I spent large parts of this movie bored.
Yeah.
You know? Like I overall liked Captain Marvel. I think Captain Marvel would have been a better movie had it been made at the same time as the original first two Iron Men before Marvel and Disney uh,
Suck the soul out of the
got so
series.
concerned with got so concerned with secrecy,
Mhm.
um, and I just don't see. There's no way the Black Widow movie, now that it's finally happening, hasn't been so closely guarded that it's not just going to be a bunch of people. Yeah, I just don't think you can give a bunch of actors partial lines and not the whole script and have them give the performance they are supposed to be giving because they don't know at the end of the day what the trajectory of their character is. So
Mhm.
just on that basis, this is not the movie I wanted. But on another basis, uh, the degree to turnaround that we've had since 2012, like I remember when the first Avengers movie came out and all this stuff about Clint and Natasha in Budapest, the degree to which everyone was dying for a Hawkeye Black Widow movie starring those two actors, and the degree to which nobody has any interest in that anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
that
it
sucks.
just is, yeah, it's just so indicative of them waiting way too long.
Squandering.
Yes.
And that would have been a much better option. And look, we're not going to dive into. We will
No.
dive into Marvel. We
We're
will dive into
talking
the
about Dune.
MCU one day. We will do that because that'll just be a podcast on its own and all the places that it went left when it shouldn't have turned right and right when it should have turned left and how it's all wrong and how I'm not even interested in seeing Spider-Man and I love Spider-Man, but that's a different story. Let's go back to Dune and the casting.
Yes.
Um, Paul Atreides is Timothy Chalamet.
Yes. That living Victorian doll.
The living Victorian doll. So I will admit, I was much like when they cast Robert Pattinson as the most recent Bruce Wayne. I was a little hesitant because I have my own, like anybody, I had my own opinions of who Paul Atreides is based on, you know, 4-year old me remembrances of the original Doom film. So clearly not a lot of, insight there. But but once I thought about it a little bit and uh of course seen some of his work, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a great casting choice." I'm actually excited about that.
I I think Timothy Chalamet is a very good actor. I think I am one of the handful of people on this planet who is not attracted to him. Uh,
Girl, I'm
and
not.
so
He's
that's
too
why,
skinny.
well, and there's also that marionette someone made of him, and it just looks so much like him. I don't think you should look that much like the marionette that
Wait,
someone
you're gonna
has
have to
made of you.
please one day send me this link
Oh,
because I
I
have
will
not
show
seen
you that
this.
picture. It is Timothy Chalamet puppet doll is very easy to find, and it's fairly accurate to his face. Um,
Oh,
but
fans, why you
the
gotta do
perfect
him like that?
example of how I feel about Timothy Chalamet is I was talking to someone about how I was so happy that he was Laurie in Little Women. Because imagine if someone in casting had fucked that up and he'd been Mr. Knightley and Emma instead.
Mm,
Like, that would have ruined Emma. Like, he just doesn't exude charisma. He exudes he exudes the character he is in Lady Bird, which is just like kind of he's like okay, here's a perfect example. He gives me the same energy Henry Cavill gives, which isn't surprising because someone did show me pictures of Henry Cavill young next to Timothy Chalamet, and like we're one superhero franchise from Timothy Chalamet beefing up to look like Henry Cavill. However, like he just exudes the same like energy that made Henry Cavill work for The Witcher and for The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Like he's kind of douchey. He's gonna mansplain something to me, and it's gonna be super hipstery, and he's kind of emo. And I'm not saying any of this is accurate. I'm just saying if he'd been Mr. Knightley, I would have been like, no, Emma, please don't even bother fighting with this man. Whereas I don't know the actor who plays Mr. Knightley, but I cannot wait to have $20 to put together so I can go watch that version of the movie and watch what I hear is Mr. Knightley stripping down to his undercoat in yearning and love for Emma. And I just don't believe Timothy
Yes!
Chalamet could exude the same romanticism. I think he would have just exuded, like, teen boy home from school, too sweaty from soccer practice, mom, please bring me some grapes.
Okay,
So,
so that's kind of why I'm glad that you've mentioned this because that's kind of why, like I said, I was at first a little disappointed in the casting. Um, I see where they might be wanting to go with Paul, and they're skewing his character a little bit younger. Um,
mhm.
and so this, and by even though Timothy is not that young anymore, like he's got to be in his 20s now, right? How is that kid?
I mean, yeah, he's definitely in his 20s. I think he's about this because he's the same age as uh oh, I can't even say her name. I give up. Uh
Oh, the
the
girl.
girl from Lady Bird.
Yeah, there's an
Sour you say I know Miss
Sarois.
Ronan, maybe. Oh, he's 24. Yeah, he's younger than me, but he's not significantly younger than me.
But
I
his
can't get over the
face
fact
is
he's
young.
5'10". He has a very young face. I agree.
His face is very young. And so that's where that always throws me. Like every time I look at him, I'm like, oh, he's still 18? No, he's not still 18. But to me, he feels younger than he is. And while Paul Atreides kind of has this like young naivete to him, um, he's also a warrior. And uh, Timothy doesn't exude that. However, once I like read some of the articles, read some things from the director, read some things from Timothy, like with uh, P Rats being B Wayne, um, like I'm on board. I'm really curious to see what's going to happen here. The other thing that's got me really excited is that Oscar Isaacs is going to be, um, oh hell, I can't remember the name of the
You got me
character.
beat. I just know he wears armor.
I mean, he's looking good doing so, but he's Paul's dad in the film, basically.
Ah, oh,
Uh,
okay.
and Jason
Okay,
Momoa is
well,
in it.
I didn't know that, but I know Zendaya's in it.
Yes, she is also in it, which I'm excited about. She can act her little tushy off. Um, they all can, though. That's the thing. Like the casting looks great.
It looks fantastic. Speaking of R. Pats and Timothy Chalamet, uh, not to segue away from Dune, but I'm just saying this really sets us up for the perfect opportunity for what we should do next or in the future with Crash Gals. It's not exactly timely, but I just think you and I should probably watch The King with Timothy Chalamet and R. Pats. It's supposed to be a trash fire, so it's not indicative of whether or not we should feel better about Dune and the Batman. I'm just saying if we watched it and then tried to describe it for people with our opinions, that would be a real fun time for everyone involved.
I think so too. Actually, I vaguely recall the wig that Robert was wearing in that film and seeing the pictures of it, like the screenshots of it. I was like, what is this? So yes, I would be down for that. Like that is the only way I can watch a movie nowadays is with some like with a headset on with somebody else.
Listen, I'm just going to tease the fact that Timothy Chalamet had to do a British accent, and he's not British, and Robert Pattinson had to do a French accent, and allegedly is rumored to have said that he based his accent on the people from Dior who dress him because I think he's one of the faces of Dior right now.
Oh my God. I think you're
And
right,
it's
actually.
not good, and I'm very excited to watch it with you.
Oh, with this trash fire, let it burn. I can't wait.
I
Well,
wish I had
that's
stronger feelings about Dune. I would definitely watch Dune. I just
no, 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 no.
I'm
Like,
lured in. I'm lured in.
well, so here's the thing about it. I'm not going to tell you to read the books because I've never read them. I would vaguely say watch the original film, but I don't recall watching it in like my adult life, so I don't know how it fares. It is, I believe, if I put this correctly, it's post Star Wars, pre Return of the Jedi. I don't know if it came before or after The Empire Strikes Back. 70s sci-fi. So it's got like that really weird niche. I don't know if you saw like the did you ever see the original Superman?
Not with clear enough recollection to say if that sways me one way or another. I'll be honest with you.
Well,
I was little enough.
I would just bring that up because like that's one of those films to me like it was a modern day at the time modern day film, but it had 70s sci-fi elements, and I have never actually thought of a way to articulate what I see 70s sci-fi is. So I was going to give you as like a reference point, like this is the sci-fi that you're looking like that you will be seeing. Um, High production for the time, like some really cool moments for the time, some phrases that I still say every once in a while, like the spice is life and can this be he is the keys Atarax or whatever it is. I don't even know what that girl was saying. I just remember it sounded really cool. Um uh but it like if you're into sci-fi films and like the history of sci-fi and stuff like that, I would say watch it. But we will probably I will probably find a way to force you to watch the remake just because I want to watch not the remake the upcoming film just because I feel it is it's a really interesting story
Yes.
and but it's being created in a post Game of Thrones world
Yes.
when the story that it tells is something that is like a forerunner to Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Like they
Listen, I'm
literally
just
have
saying we can put it
houses.
on the list. We can watch the old one. We can watch the new one. We'll have some conversations about it because I'm up for a three-parter of Timothy Chalamet adjacent works. Because I've seen a lot of the movies he's made. I just I don't get it. I don't not get it as an actor. He was fantastic in Lady Bird, and he was really good in Call Me by Your Name. But this attraction thing that other people have, where they're excited to see him in things, I'm just like, oh, okie dokie. And so if we can find that in that I found with Robert Pattinson once upon a time, I think that would be a really good thing. Or just an in with Dune. I think that would really give some flavor to my feelings for the upcoming one when we watch it.
We'll take this conversation offline because I feel like I know where this is coming from. Not not you, but like the
Yes.
fandemonium over
Yes.
over
Oh,
him.
if those for those 11 people who may listen to this,
Hmm.
don't at Timothy Chalamet. Don't tell him I said any of these things. I don't want that sort of attention. I have no interest in it. And I don't want this to be a oh, what was it they did to Spider-Man? Where they told him it looked like he had a frog in his mouth whenever he smiles.
Oh
Let's not let this be Timothy Chalamet's frog in his mouth. Don't
yeah.
let this be the reason we have 24 people listening to this audio. I think he's a very good actor, but
He is a
also
very
I'm
good
going to
actor.
send you that picture of a
The
doll
doll.
someone made with his giant head.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation of where like fans and and like our idols we should not cross. But that's for another story, or excuse me, another time, another cast. I want to thank all tens and twenties of you who took the time to make it to the end of Cash Gal Crash Gals. Can't talk tonight. Um, we will return
TBD, frankly.
TBD. Yes.
But we appreciate you following along. It was a little bit rambling and not as clear cut with the subject as we get back into remembering how to do this. But it's fun for us to do, and hopefully it's fun for you to listen to. And we hope you come back for when the next one drops.
Goodbye.